later research of yours is more about, as you kind of alluded to, authorship in academic research. So topics of credit, collaboration, contribution, attribution, even plagiarism. And you point to classifying contributions and setting standards for role taxonomy. Could you elaborate on why this is important? And what are the blockers, if any, to implementing a system like that?
Sure. I'll start just quickly on how this came about. So I mentioned that I had spent some time at Harvard in the provost's office, and my job when I was there for about 4 or 5 years was to help pull together tenure and promotion cases and look at people's kind of record of scholarship and excellence. Really, really fascinating work, also closely related to publishing. But it became clear to me that there's this issue. Like if you're preparing your CV or your dossier, and you happen to be a researcher where the main record of what you've done or achieved is a list of publications, there's a total mismatch between how that information is conveyed and what actually happened in the research. So, you may be familiar with the fact that it's pretty common practice in the sciences, which are increasingly multi-authored, to have the first author or the last author positions, which are the most prominent, be, say, the lab head, the person who obtained the funding. And to have there be like no indication in a long list of authors, like who actually, was behind this methodology, who actually did this work, who actually did the writing of this paper. And the fact that process, this sort of like two-dimensional way of representing authorship, obfuscates all the contribution underneath, just, struck me as being one of the ways in which the biases that we've been talking about through this conversation get perpetuated. And particularly a barrier for young researchers, because the culture of a lot of labs, of course, it varies from field to field, is, graduate students and postdocs might be doing the bulk of the work, but might not be in that most prominent author position. So the way I think about things as a sort of data scientist manqué, I guess, is that let's create another dimension on which to represent this other signal, right? That, okay, we don't have to change anything about the order of author names, but we can have a way of signaling in a machine readable way that, this individual contributed to the underlying statistical model, or this individual did the bulk of the data analysis or writing or what have you. And so while I was still working at Harvard, I pulled together a bunch of people I knew who would get this whole problem space, and a bunch of people who probably never thought about things that way, into a workshop. And, this was 2012, I think, that we had this workshop. And just a couple of months ago, or maybe just a couple of weeks ago, the National Information Standards Organization announced that this taxonomy is now a formal technical standard, which is really fun. And it's it's collaborative work. There's several people involved. Worked most closely with my colleague in the UK, Liz Allen, and there were several people involved. But we over the years we've seen more and more publishers adopt this standard, so that it means that if you're publishing a paper in Cell, for example, and you're contributing it, you're not only going to indicate who the authors are, you're going to choose from this standardized taxonomy of roles, who did what. And it's adoption is growing. There's still barriers, because it's obviously an imperfect taxonomy. There are only 14 roles, and there are many ways to talk about contribution. And of course, the ways in which people contribute to research varies tremendously across the different fields, but it's a good place to start. And so, my hope is that it continues to grow, and it just changes the conversation and enriches the vocabulary that we have to talk about how we've contributed to research or contributed to an article.
Very cool. I can see the utility in this. There are a handful of papers from my time when I used to be publishing papers regularly where it does state exactly what I did on the paper. And I'm always like, that seems really helpful. Like, it it's nice that I'm being acknowledged for having done the statistical analysis, for example,
Yeah.
and that it's clear that somebody else actually did all the writing and that I wasn't really involved in that at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes so much sense to be able to have that on paper. So, yeah, great that you've done that.
Yeah,
Um,
but the way it was being done in the past, though, was in a free text way,
oh,
right? And
totally.
so,
Yeah,
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 and
yeah.
so the whole point of standardizing it is again to make it machine readable. And
Right.
even though this kind of description is qualitative, essentially, it provides a foundation for other quantitative metrics to be created that go beyond the kinds of metrics we use currently. Um,
100%. Yeah.
yeah, and I can imagine a whole other career for myself where all I did full time was work on different types of things like this because I'm fascinated by it. And but I'm glad to see this come to fruition.